This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South Africans are left without any active COVID-19 vaccinations after suspension of Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The dangers of over-the-counter medication in treating COVID-19 symptoms. And we update you on John Kerry's visit to China ahead of a critical U.S.-led climate change virtual summit. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. National carrier Air Tanzania acquires 3 more planes to boost domestic air travel. And hundreds of endangered Cape cormorants return to Cape Town's Robben Island. We begin in South Africa, which finds itself without an active COVID-19 vaccination program after halting the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The country's drugs regulator says it had recently reviewed data from Johnson & Johnson's local research study immunizing healthcare workers, but did not find any major safety concerns. South Africa joined the U.S. in suspending the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine after 6 recipients formed rare blood clots in the U.S. South Africa had already ditched the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was found to be inadequate in dealing with the existing dominant variant of the coronavirus. The Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer vaccines were found to be more effective against the prevailing variant. Let's now hear what South Africans think about these latest developments.
I was initially disappointed, and I was disappointed largely because I had understood that the US had specific reasons to pause under a particular context, and that is that they have other options in terms of vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna that they are rolling out, and they've already rolled out millions of vaccines.
I was also thinking of actually taking this vaccine at some point in time. But after that, obviously when I heard about the suspension of the vaccine, I'm now going to have second thoughts. I was willing to actually think about it, but now that it's going to create clots in the blood and all of that, I'm thinking about my health at the same time as well.
The Africa CDC says it's closely monitoring reports on Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. Both South Africa and the U.S. have suspended use of the jab. The U.S. FDA suspended its use after vaccine recipients developed rare blood clots. CGTN's Guram Chala exclusively spoke with the director of the Africa CDC about the latest.
Dr. John Nkengasong, thank you so much on behalf of CGTN. An incident has been heard from the United States about the Johnson & Johnson vaccination, and after a few people were reported dead and blood clottings have been heard after they took the J&J vaccinations, the U.S. CDC and the U.S. FDA have temporarily paused the use of this vaccination. Now, Africa, more specifically in South Africa, this Johnson & Johnson vaccination is being used. But what are you really reacting on the news?
We heard the news yesterday of the temporary pause for the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the United States. And this was realized after about 6.6 million people have been vaccinated. And out of the 6.6 million, 6 people developed a blood clotting. So the FDA and the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention thought that because of cautionary measures, they had to suspend this and investigate it further. If you look at the events, that is the 6 out of 6.6 million vaccinations, it is really some rare events happening, which would normally perhaps happen in normal settings there. So I think that is a recognition of that. The second thing we need to recognize is that it is a positive thing that the FDA and the United CDC, because of the surveillance systems that they have put in place to monitor people that have been taking these vaccines, we're able to detect this extremely limited few number of people there. So I just want this to be very clear that it speaks to the fact that when we say in public health that we have systems that are monitoring people that have received vaccines, it is actually monitoring them. So that is a positive thing that has happened. Now, we'll wait in the coming days to see what the detailed analysis from the CDC and FDA will tell us, and that will determine the path forward. Maybe, and just maybe, in the coming days, they will say, we've looked at these events, they're extremely rare, and we provide recommendations that this vaccination should continue.
What is the recommendation in general terms from the Africa CDC side for the entire continent when it comes to the usage of this vaccination?
This is a rare event that we are looking at this situation carefully, and we will provide definitive guidance once we know more about it. Remember, this just happened yesterday, and we are in touch with the U.S. Officials. We are in touch with the government of South Africa. Yesterday, I spoke with the Minister of Health of South Africa, and we've remained in touch. Based on the analysis in South Africa, of everyone who has been vaccinated in South Africa, there's absolutely no event of this nature that has been recorded. South Africa is the only country in Africa that is vaccinating using the Johnson & Johnson because the clinical trials started there. So, and none of the events were observed during the clinical trial phase. So it is, for Africa CDC, we have to watch the space carefully, see more information, and then we'll be able to provide definitive guidelines.
Meanwhile, a shipment of Chinese-made Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccines has arrived in Mauritius. Several dignitaries were on hand to receive the donation, including the country's Minister of Health, Dr. Khalej Jagutpal. According to him, the doses are to be used in a national vaccination campaign. Dr. Jagutpal says the shipment is an example of the friendly ties between both countries. Gong Yifen, the charge d'affaires from the Chinese embassy, says China will continue to work with Mauritius to overcome COVID-19. Egypt and China have signed an agreement to locally produce COVID-19 vaccines. The Cairo-based government vaccination arm, Vaccination, is leading an alliance of Egyptian pharmaceuticals that plans to manufacture some 80 million vaccines annually in collaboration with China's Sinovac. The aim is to make Egypt a regional hub for vaccine production. Here's Adel Amuhui with details.
Vaccine cooperation between Egypt and China is reaching new heights. Egyptian Health Minister Hala Zaid announced the signing of an agreement with China's giant pharmaceutical Sinovac to produce COVID-19 vaccines domestically.
The Prime Minister's office and the Egyptian President have approved the joint production agreement with the Chinese company Sinovac to produce COVID-19 vaccines. I would like to thank China for its great support and for opening wide cooperation with Chinese companies. Also for its work to empower Egypt to produce the Sinovac vaccine here in the country with full transfer of technology.
An alliance of Egyptian companies led by government's vaccination arm Vaccination will be producing the Chinese vaccine.
The WHO is supporting Egypt to become a regional hub for manufacturing and distributing COVID-19 vaccines. A few weeks ago, the organization sent experts to evaluate Vaccin's production lines in preparation for the manufacture of the vaccines in Egypt and exporting the jab to African countries too. It approved the use of the factory to produce the vaccines.
Egypt and China are finalizing the agreement and logistics to produce the Sinovac COVID-19 jab. Officials here say they are targeting to produce 80 million doses annually.
We have the necessary expertise to produce and distribute vaccines, so transferring the technology of the COVID-19 vaccine from China to Egypt won't be hard. We can develop it in great quality because the technology of developing that vaccine is not so complicated. Reaching the 80 million doses target won't happen this year, but in later stages.
In the beginning, the production will start in the government's Vaccination factory, which has a ready capacity of producing 20 million doses annually. New production lines will then be established to raise the output capacity to 40 million doses. It's a great push for Egypt's vaccination efforts. Egypt has only 1.5 million vaccines, and it's targeting to vaccinate 100 million people.
Cooperation in health matters between Egypt and China under the pandemic has been exemplary. Egypt was among the few nations in the world that conducted phase 3 human clinical trials for Chinese COVID-19 vaccines. When the jab became available for emergency use, Egypt became the first country in Africa to receive them. Producing Sinovac's COVID-19 vaccine will further deepen health ties with China, which the pandemic has greatly developed. The Egyptian government has not yet announced a date for when the vaccine production is set to begin. It is racing against time, however, to launch this landmark step for Africa in fighting the pandemic before the year ends. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Malawi will have to dispose of about 16,000 coronavirus vaccines. The officials there say the AstraZeneca doses are about to expire due to reluctance among citizens to take the vaccine. The doses were among the 102,000 donated by the African Union last month. The health officials in that country say inoculations were rolled out from mid-March. The aim is vaccinating 11 million people by the end of this year. So far, half of the 530,000 vaccines from donors have been administered. Coronavirus infections in Malawi have been relatively low, but there has been reports of surges since the beginning of April. The country is now at about 34,000 cases and has recorded above 1,100 deaths. And that's according to the Africa Centers for Disease and Control Prevention. Many people on the African continent have resorted to self-medication to treat COVID-19 symptoms. Most prefer using concoctions made from ginger and garlic with a combination of antibiotics to treat their infections. But as CGTN's Inexacola reports, some are finding out the hard way that remedies and drugs being sold over the counter could be worsening their conditions.
In the outskirts of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, Emmanuel Atamba and his wife, Mercy Atamba, are tending to their small garden farm. A venture they started days after recovering from COVID-19.
What we went through was really terrible. It was very scary.
Their experience with the coronavirus began after they started exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms. Subsequent laboratory tests only confirmed their fears.
And we went into treatment, the whole house. Of course, the kids were also showing symptoms. But the basic medication, of course, what they say, you take the ginger, lemon, garlic, and turmeric. That is really what really helped us a lot in the initial phase. We were also given immune boosters.
Placed under home-based care, Atamba relied on recommendations from recovered patients. One drug was heavily mentioned, azithromycin.
When I went to the doctor, I asked what I can use. They also recommended the same, and they said if you have chest pains, you use azithromycin. But of course, there was really not much information exactly about how to use the drug, how much of the drugs to use. It was just 1 tablet per day, but not clear for how many days.
This nearly cost the life of his wife after 10 days of drug taking.
She started feeling weak, she had a headache, she became dizzy, and she was really struggling to breathe. And it was very scary because we opened the windows and it couldn't work. We went outside with her, sat outside with her, it still could not work.
Atamba decided to rush his wife to hospital. He feared that COVID-19 may have damaged his wife's lungs. But he will come to learn that her problem was not caused by COVID-19, but the drug that she used. She was simply showing symptoms of azithromycin overdose.
And he asked me, had she finished the dose? And then I was surprised because I didn't even know there was a dose.
Azithromycin is a 3-day dosage drug supposed to be administered by a qualified physician, but the family had bought theirs over the counter at a local chemist. Experts say self-medication is a practice that is on an upward trend on the African continent, especially during the pandemic. The Kenya Pharmacy and Poisons Board says self-medication is leading many not to having proper medical advice when needed. And some practitioners warn that self-medication could create a bigger problem in the future.
We are having a situation where diseases that could be treated by simple antibiotics, the antibiotics no longer work.
Doctors in Africa say a majority of COVID-19 patients placed under home-based care usually opt for self-medication once they exhibit flu-like symptoms, only to have their conditions worsen.
COVID-19 is a virus. Antibiotics are not indicated in the virus situation. The instance when we use azithromycin is specific. Doctors understand what it's being used for in particular cases, not for every single case of COVID-19.
With COVID-19 still spreading across the African population, doctors are advising anyone with symptoms to seek medical advice first before embarking on any treatment. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, more news making headlines in a return, including we update you on John Kerry's visit to China ahead of a critical U.S.-led climate change virtual summit. And hundreds of endangered Cape cormorants returned to Cape Town's Robben Island.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Shanghai, focusing on areas of potential collaboration. Kerry is the first official in the U.S. new administration to visit China with high expectations. Xi Mingqi reports from Shanghai.
Behind me is the Dongjiao State Guest Hotel where the talks are taking place now. All morning we've been seeing vehicles in and out, and there are actually quite a few media outlets around. So interest is high in these talks. And given the fact that Kerry is the first Biden administration official to visit China, there's been a lot of speculations as to whether the two sides will talk about issues beyond climate change, but that's something we can only wait and see at this moment. So far, we know that Kerry is in Shanghai at the invitation of China's Ministry of Ecology and Environment. And according to an official statement released by the U.S. State Department, the climate envoy is here to discuss raising global climate ambitions ahead of the U.S. President Joe Biden's leaders summit on climate next week. Now, China has yet to confirm its participation at the summit, so that's very likely something the two sides will talk about this time. And Beijing also said the two sides will exchange views on the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Conference scheduled in November in Glasgow. Although bilateral collaboration in this field has taken a nosedive under Trump administration, which also saw the U.S. withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And now that climate change is back and high on the Joe Biden's administration's agenda, it remains to be seen whether and how the two sides will continue and resume their collaboration in this field.
Well, China's solar industry plays an important role in helping the country reach its 2060 carbon neutral goal. Increasingly across the country, solar energy is being used in its structures.
This building can generate 120,000 kilowatt-hour electricity per year. That's about 1,000 families' electricity need for an entire year, or allow a new energy vehicle to circulate the Earth 110 times. It's built with the BIPV system, Building Integrated Photovoltaics. It's a solar power generating system integrated into the exterior of a building, such as the roof or its walls. The system also provides supporting functions, such as thermal and sound insulation, and it can also turn solar power into electricity. Zhang Yifei is an engineer at Yingli Group and has constructed over 50 BIPV buildings in China.
This is different from traditional solar panels. Generating electricity is not the only purpose for the BIPV system. It meets other requirements such as fire safety and being waterproof. Most buildings in the city don't have enough roof space to accommodate the number of solar panels, so it requires both the roof and walls to generate electricity. BIPV will be the future in terms of development of the green buildings.
This is the material used. 1 square meter of it can generate about 0.7 kilowatt-hour of electricity per hour, and 8 square meters of this will produce enough electricity to meet a family's daily demand. China is ramping up its clean power generation to reach its 2060 carbon neutrality goal. In one of its latest energy white papers, China pledges to raise the energy saving standards of new buildings. At least 31 provinces also laid out supporting policies for constructing green buildings.
1/6 of China's building area can be installed with solar panels. That means the total amount of China's new green building is expected to exceed 10 billion square meters. Those panels will generate 1.5 trillion kilowatt-hour electricity per year.
BIPV is not just betting on support from the government, but also from the country's huge solar industry. By the end of 2019, China led the world in this sector, with more than 60% of the world's solar panels made here.
中国新增光伏装机规模达到 48.2 吉瓦。
The total capacity of China's newly added solar panel installations ranked first in the world for 8 consecutive years. China's solar industry plays an important role in the nation's energy restructuring. Meanwhile, the cost of solar energy has decreased by about 90% in the past 10 years. That leads to a huge drop in BIPV costs as well. The unique advantage of the BIPV is that it contributes to energy conservation in buildings.
Now, the solar sector is on track to become China's third largest electricity source, as companies are charging their way into the future.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has ordered officials to explore petitioning an international court over Japan's decision to dump treated but radioactive water into the sea. Japan unveiled plans on Tuesday involving more than 1 million tons of contaminated water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant. Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso said that he'd heard that treated radioactive water was okay to drink. Japan's reconstruction agency also released a mascot for the radioactive substance tritium. It was removed due to criticism. Japan's decision has drawn widespread criticism at home and abroad. South Korea summoned Tokyo's ambassador in Seoul, Koichi Aiboshi.
The Japanese government's decision is absolutely unacceptable.
The decision to release the Fukushima tank water into the sea not only threatens the safety of neighboring countries and the marine environment, but also is a measure unilaterally decided without sufficient discussion and agreement with our country, which is the nearest neighboring country.
The World Health Organization says around a quarter of Nigerians are suffering from some form of mental illness. Lack of mental health education is one of the major factors contributing to this problem. Experts are helping to tackle this by sensitizing people on the need to seek professional help early enough. Correspondent Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
Esther nearly dropped out of a postgraduate program 3 years ago. She suffered from depression as a result of academic pressure and other personal issues. But Esther says she eventually got help, managed to finish her program, and she's now helping to educate other people living with mental health problems.
Instead of spending 24 months, I had to spend extra. And however, regardless of all of that, I have been able to get help and pull through, get my life back on track, and I've been able to get a job, live a normal life, and even volunteer as an educator.
According to the WHO, around 25% of Nigerians suffer from some form of mental illness, and many don't seek help in time. At this mental health awareness hub, run by a non-profit organization, Gede Foundation, people are encouraged to seek help from psychologists and get early therapy. Experts here say wrong perceptions on mental illness, poor awareness about its causes, and widespread stigma are some of the reasons why Nigeria has increasing cases of mental illness.
A lot of people believe that mental health problems are as a result of things that are spiritual in nature, or maybe someone has cursed the other person, you know. And this lack of understanding, you know, it gives us a lot of setback, because a lot of people do not reach out early enough, and then they have heightened worsened conditions.
The federal government wants religious and traditional leaders to help educate citizens better about taking their mental health seriously.
The government has instituted public mental health campaign awareness across the country, but experts say more needs to be done to effectively tackle the mental health problems in Nigeria.
Investing in mental health encompasses so many things. First and foremost, it will be awareness, mental health education, mental health prevention, and mental health promotion by all stakeholders involved.
And with these interventions, many more Nigerians could learn how to take their mental health more seriously, just like Esther, and help produce a more productive society across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's now turn our attention to wildlife in South Africa, where close to 2,000 endangered Cape cormorants are being returned to Cape Town's Robben Island. They've all been successfully rehabilitated at a local seabird hospital after they were earlier found abandoned on the island. CGTN's Travis Andrews tells us more.
After 3 months of rehabilitative care, these Cape cormorants are amongst the first to finally set foot back on Robben Island. The seabirds were being cared for at Seabird Rehabilitation Centre, Sankob, who received them when they were just dehydrated chicks. Researchers discovered them abandoned together on the island after the adults failed to return from their search for prey at sea. Now the first lot of healthy Cape cormorants are being returned to the island by Sankob researchers.
We release the birds. Before we release, we obviously check that they're all healthy, that they have the right weight, that they're waterproof, and then when we take them over to Robben, they're under enclosure for 2 days, and then they're being released, and then they're being observed by our staff on the island.
So far, around 640 have been taken back to their colony, while the others are still being cared for at Sankob Seabird Hospital. Seabird rangers stationed on the island, though, have been monitoring the well-being of the rehabilitated flock.
Looking at if the birds are integrating with the wild ones, of which that is important. We're looking at monitoring if they those that are kind of like weak, and then sending them back to Sankob for rehabilitation again.
Cape cormorants are also considered as endangered, so maintaining a healthy population on Robben Island has become a key conservational issue for seabird researchers. One issue that remains critical to the sustainability of the seabird colony on this island is the amount of food around the island, and scientists will have to monitor those fish stocks carefully over the next few months.
The next fish survey that is run by government will be in May or June, so then we know how much fish is around at the moment. But seeing that we are seeing large flocks of cormorants at the moment in all our bays shows that there seems to be fish around.
For now, though, the seabirds seem to be settling in well, and all indications are that the entire rescued flock will make a successful return and reintegration on Robben Island, which is important to boosting their very low numbers. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, let's now recap on the hour's top stories. Malawi will have to dispose of about 16,000 coronavirus vaccines. The officials there say the AstraZeneca doses are about to expire due to reluctance among citizens to take the vaccine. The doses were among the 102,000 donated by the African Union last month. And the U.S.-led climate change envoy John Kerry has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Shanghai, focusing on areas of potential collaboration. Kerry is the first official in the U.S. new administration to visit China with high expectations. Well, let's now take a short break and return. More news making headlines in the world of business. Let's take a look. National carrier Air Tanzania acquires 3 more planes to boost domestic air travel.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, it's time now for the business news. We begin in Tanzania, which has bought 3 new planes, and that's the word from Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa. The Prime Minister says that the planes are to bring the number of government-owned fleets to 12. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
Air Tanzania is looking to take off as a serious player in East Africa's aviation game. The company suffered a turbulent time over the last few decades, involving allegations of mismanagement and the loss of millions of dollars. The government under former President John Magufuli initiated a new drive to revive Air Tanzania Company Limited by acquiring brand new aircrafts.
The government has completed the purchase of 3 new planes, 2 being Airbuses, 2 20-300s and 1 -8-400. These planes will arrive during this year, 2021 to 2022. The government will now own the 12 aircrafts as previously planned.
The turbulence looks set to continue, according to a Chief Auditor General report, which revealed losses of $25 million during the 2019-2020 financial year. Analysts say the airline business is a complex one and that across the globe, all major airlines are making losses. An aviation expert for 30 years, Mustafa Katau says aviation is a long-term game and that Air Tanzania has an opportunity to make profits.
I can tell you there's huge scope for flights within Africa. We have 2 airlines which are dominating this market. Ethiopian Airlines and Kenya Airways are dominating the African market. Previously we had South African Airways, which has suspended its operations, but I'm very much confident that Air Tanzania will do a turnaround in the next 3 to 5 years.
The government believes reviving Air Tanzania could be critical in promoting other economic sectors, including tourism, agriculture, fisheries, and trade. In the early 1980s, Air Tanzania used to fly internationally to Dubai, Mumbai, Port Louis, London, and Moroni. The airline faced challenges in the mid-90s to the 2000s, but now the government is looking to use this upgraded fleet to position itself as a strong regional player in the next couple of years. This comes as some foreign airlines to the Kilimanjaro International Airport have resumed flights after recent suspensions following reduced traffic because of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Kenya Airways, Turkish Airlines, and Germany-based Condor are also in talks to resume flights to the Kilimanjaro International Airport, Tanzania's gateway to the northern tourism circuit. Experts believe stabilizing the air transport industry will be key to the survival of the tourism sector.
Tourism goes hand in hand with flights. You cannot separate this, because people have to be brought from wherever they are. And the quickest, reliable way of bringing them to Tanzania counts a lot.
Though President John Magufuli has passed away, his support for the aviation industry will likely continue under President Samia Suluhu Hassan to the relief of the aviation industry. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
The hospitality sector is still reeling from the damage caused to tourism into and out of Africa. For a country like South Africa, tourism was seen as an unemployment generator and wealth creator, and then COVID-19 struck. The various lockdowns have created more uncertainty, and while provincial borders are open to some domestic tourism, it's generally accepted that the high-end tourism properties aren't in a position to offer the huge discounts needed to make their properties attractive to local visitors. Angela Coppola has more on this story.
Occupancy levels for South African hospitality establishments that have opened as restrictions were eased have hovered between 20 and 30% for the past year, and it's becoming increasingly unsustainable.
These establishments that have opened are literally putting money into the operations to stretch and make sure that they remain open. It simply means that it's not sustainable. The levels that we're operating at the moment, even if we talk about domestic tourism, not sustainable at all. It means you're not even breaking even, you're putting money into it.
It was unprecedented, and hotel operators had to move quickly.
Around this time last year, it was how do we keep these businesses liquid and avoid insolvency? Because the cash dried up extremely quickly, and nobody saw it coming. There was no sort of 3 months of warning. It was an immediate shock. And of course, that created a cash crunch very, very quickly indeed.
Continental hoteliers had to make some tough decisions at the start of the pandemic. Stay open or close.
For us, it was a question of staying open, because I thought that in this situation, nobody knows what's going to happen. But what's for certain is two things. Every crisis brings some kind of opportunity. And if you close, that's the one thing that's certain. And if there's the other thing that was certain is if you close, revenue is definitely going to be zero.
Countries like South Africa that depend on tourism as a job creator and foreign currency earner are struggling. Industry bodies are calling for help on the demand and supply side of the business.
And we need to figure out a way of helping these businesses. And one of these things is, one of the ways is to, perhaps look at the rates and taxes to make sure that, there is a relief from that point of view, and many other licenses that are related to the tourism businesses, including the liquor license, vehicle licenses and things like that.
The South African hospitality sector is ready to open its doors, but it all depends on the vaccination program getting underway quickly and covering as many people as possible before foreigners will be enticed back into the country. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Ethiopian Communications Authority has again extended the deadline for operators bidding for new operating licenses. Bids are now required by April the 26th. The authority says the decision was taken in response to requests from bidders for more time to finalize offers in light of the COVID-19 market conditions. Angela Coppola has the latest on the bidding process.
The initial tender request was issued at the end of November. The Ethiopian Communications Authority confirmed it had received those extension requests after the initial deadline of 5 March because it wasn't met by several key international mobile network operators. The regulator says that it had initially received expressions from 9 telecom and 2 non-telecom operators. Analysts say that in South Africa, MTN will bid for one of the licenses, and the other South African heavyweight Vodacom are also likely to have declared an interest in a license. We understand that MTN will be bidding directly, while Vodacom and Vodafone, in fact, will be bidding through their Kenyan subsidiary Safaricom. It's understood that Orange, the French mobile network operator and a part of French Telecom, is also interested. Airtel, in the meantime, has withdrawn from the process, and China's Sharing Mobile may well still submit a bid. The regulator also announced that there are plans to sell a 45% stake in Ethio Telecom, the 100-year-old state monopoly. The Ethiopian government have also announced that this is part of the plans to liberalize the sector. Almost 3 years ago was when it was first announced, as part of the telecom sector reforms. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Chinese data released this week shows a strong recovery in international trade. Both imports and exports rose significantly in March compared to 2020 and 2019 despite the pandemic. As CGTN's Sumitra Naidu explores, these numbers are especially encouraging for Africa, as China is the continent's largest trading partner.
2020 was a dismal year for the global economy. Almost every major economy contracted. China managed a narrow escape, recording 2.6% growth for the year. Even though COVID is still present, China seems to be back on track.
China was the only major economy that grew during the COVID-ravaged 2020 year of over 2%. China's growth forecast this year may even reach 8%. So clearly the global economy is, I would argue, Asia-led, with China being at its center.
Chinese exports in March came in 30.6% higher in dollar terms compared to last year. It was slightly below analyst expectations, but still a strong number. China's trade surplus dropped to just under $14 billion as imports climbed 38%, much higher than was expected.
That is a good indication for us as a country which exports to China, because we will benefit from strong Chinese demand. It is also good news for the global economy. China is one of the large economies in the world. When Chinese goods are flowing, we tend to see global activity also picking up, because countries that trade a lot with China do benefit from that higher volumes.
Last year, trade between China and Africa fell for the first time in 16 years. A 14% decline was recorded in the first 3 months of 2020. But the trade data coming out of China does suggest that it is leading a global economic recovery.
China's robust growth certainly underpins the growth story trajectory of many economies, particularly those that export. The export focus is predominantly commodities. That's talking about Africa. So China's very strong recovery rebound, dare I use the word post-COVID-19, undoubtedly good news for commodity exporting economies.
And it seems the trade relationship between the United States and China is also back on track. In March, China's imports from the United States rose by 75% to $17.29 billion, while exports rose by 53% to $38.66 billion US. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egypt's smartphone market recorded a healthy year-on-year growth during 2020 despite the economic slump caused by the pandemic. According to the latest figures announced by financial data firm International Data Corporation, Egypt's smartphone market grew 10.6% year-on-year in 2020 to a total 12 million units. Yasser Hakim has more details from Cairo.
Wael Shaban sells smartphones in his shop that's tucked in one of Egypt's capital's bustling streets. He says 2020 saw a significant increase in sales of smartphones, in spite of the economic fallout from the novel coronavirus pandemic.
Because everyone is staying at home, everyone is trying to kill time by going online while others are working online from home. To keep up with the latest apps and services, many people have had to upgrade their old phones and buy new smartphones, which has then raised their sales.
According to the International Data Corporation Worldwide Report, there are nearly 12 million smartphones that were sold in Egypt in 2020. Samsung has been leading with 25% market share, but Chinese smartphones are quickly catching up.
Chinese mobile phones are in high demand because of the variety on offer. There is a variety in price, a variety in options, and they all have good quality for the market. Oppo, Samsung, Huawei and Realme have the highest sales.
Experts say the market is witnessing a shift since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, as people reduce physical interactions and embrace digital transactions.
Because of the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, people are not able to meet like they used to before. So all their dealings are done through the mobile phone. Naturally, sales increased. In addition, there are new models introduced every few months with more options to attract clients.
Egypt's latest digital transformation drive has had its positive effect as well.
Every state service now is through an app that you have to download. For example, paying electricity and water bills is now through smartphones. It has become a necessity in everyday life.
Experts believe 2021 will see further sales increase as more people and services go online. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Some sport action after the break. Here's what you can expect. Manchester City and Real Madrid progress to the UEFA Champions League semi-finals.
As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage through the world, forcing many countries into multiple lockdowns, in Kenya, 5 individuals who had qualified for the already postponed Tokyo 2020 Olympics are continuing to sharpen their skills. Christine Ongare is a boxer who has qualified for her first ever Olympic Games. Her coach, David Munuhe, is on his second stint, having featured in the 2016 edition. For rugby coach Felix Olo and Kenya's women's sevens captain Philadelphia Orlando, this is a chance for the team to go a step further in the tournament. While for Mutile Yavi, who switched citizenship from Kenya to Bahrain, this is a chance to prove herself as an elite runner after failing to make the Kenya Youth Athletics team.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.